Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Hello and welcome to Nirmal Bang, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Dadia. We have with us Mr. Ashwin Parekh, Managing Partner at Ashwin Parekh Advisory Services, joining in. Welcome to the show, Mr. Parekh. It's a pleasure to speak to you as well after a really long time. I hope you and your family and all colleagues around you are keeping safe in these unprecedented times.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you so much.
Right. Mr. Parekh, let's understand as to what's happened from March to now. The financial system as a whole was already struggling over the last couple of months. In fact, if you talk about 2019 as a year, and with that, not that the economy was in a very good shape as well. With that, COVID is something which hit us. How would you actually describe the financial system's journey from March to now, taking the impact of COVID into consideration?
Sure. So, see, I mean, basically, let's look at the let's say, the system, the financial banking system or the financial services system before COVID and then immediately thereafter. As such, before COVID also, it was struggling. I mean, we all know that, far too many things were happening. Public sector banking was consolidating. There were a lot of NPAs already in the system arising out of the economic performance. The economy has not been performing from almost about 2016-17 onwards. And therefore, there is a lot of backlog. In that backdrop, we had COVID. Now, what has happened in the COVID kind of a scenario, is that the rollout of stimulus, has been more or less on the backs of the banking system. So whether you look at the ECLGS1, ECLGS2, and the COVID-19 stress resolution by the RBI, in all these programs, stimulus programs, particularly aiming at different sectors, MSME to start with, and then the larger borrowers and everybody else, it's been resting on the backs of the banking system. So there is a bit of an over dependence on the banking system to that extent, I would say. The good thing, I mean, I must say, and I must say that I must commend the government for at least making the emergency credit arrangement guaranteed on a back to back by the government. I think in the past, in 2008, 9, 10 period, when we had the global financial crisis, the government rested a lot of their stimulus program on the banking system, and the banking system started putting a lot of their NPAs under the carpet on account of that moratorium, the 1 year holiday that they enjoyed. And then suddenly it started showing its ugly face in 2014. This time, Hiral, it's a little different story. And what is the different story? I'll explain. You see, A, there is no need for banking system to really hide their NPAs. You know, all the three programs, the stimulus programs, are actually encouraging the banking system to really keep the borrower's account standard and keep it healthy. So to that extent, I mean, I would say from the government and the regulator side, I would say very commendable effort, quite clearly. What is, however, still going wrong? What is still going wrong, perhaps, is, two or three things. I mean, we are saying that, look, fortunately, during this period, COVID period, the monsoons were reasonable. The rural demand has really come out. And the rural demand is manifesting itself in the economy in terms of different kinds of, let's say, things which are on the roll at this point in time. I mean, on account of COVID and on account of behavioral changes, auto sector is really doing well. So I would say in the backdrop of all this, where is our financial system or the banking system? Public sector banking still facing challenges. They'll have more and more challenges on account of capital. They're still struggling with the consolidation. Private sector banking is a huge opportunity. And I can certainly see that the next 10 years, at least next 5 years, are totally given to private sector banking.
Right.
So I suppose in that backdrop, some of the new things which have also happened, and we'll talk about it. when we come about, let's say, some of the recent developments in the regulators' thinking also. But I suppose that's where the best way to analyze the fear of NPAs is here and valid, quite clearly. What the numbers will look like will all depend on how the economy recovers, I would say.
Mm. Right. So, Mr. Parekh, taking this into consideration, if you have to look at COVID and the stimulus packages as well, RBI has really acted fast with regards to the measures, the interest rate cuts, the moratoriums that they've given, at least on that front. However, what's happened is we don't know what is going to be the impact with regards to where the asset quality is concerned, say 12 to 18 months from now, taking the measures into consideration. Do you think yet a couple of more things that the RBI needs to do? Because right now they're trying to stem the asset quality rot in the banking system.
Sure. So, see, I mean, sometimes, what may happen is you start with a certain set of objectives and then you roll out a certain reform, let's say, based on those assumptions. Then far too many variables start sort of, playing their part. So, in the Indian context, what seems to have happened is that this entire judiciary process,
Mm,
that is the borrowers approaching, let's say, the Supreme Court, seeking relief on the interest or interest on interest, let's say, for that moratorium period, suggesting that there was no economic activity during that point in time. So those things have really created a bit of sort of, delay in the system. So let me articulate my thoughts. One of the objectives was that if the asset is standard under COVID-19 resolution program, or under the guaranteed program, if we were certifying under, or if it was meeting with those requirements, then with the government, let's say, guaranteed kind of backup, the banking system could expand its credit. Now,
mm,
what has happened is there is a confusion in the borrower's mind in terms of when he should really go for which part of the reform, forgetting that they have to remain normal and standard throughout the COVID-19 sort of, stress resolution program announced by the RBI.
mm.
Now, this has created a bit of a confusion and it is taking longer. I mean, as we speak, the Supreme Court hearings are also sort of, getting conducted in this particular area. The government has done its work, I would say, in getting back to the system and saying, look, interest on interest, which according to the last estimate was about 18,000 odd crores, they said the government is prepared to fund that part in sort of, So the borrowers are in a confused state at this point in time on account of this judiciary outcome. The banking system is also in a bit of a flux at this point. The assumptions are not playing out, you see. The so-called reform or the so-called resolution comfort, that the RBI, let's say, offered, and also the government under the ECLGS 1 and 2, which are not panning out. I mean, when I look at the actual numbers, I mean, I was intrigued by, last week I carried out a survey of the bankers.
Mm.
Only 1.6 lakh credit under the ECLGS 1 compared to 3 lakh crores, or compared to 2.5 or 3 lakhs under COVID-19 resolution, we are looking at a number of about 65,000 crores so far. So
Mm.
the borrowers are also not coming forward. They seem to be in a little bit of a confused state, Hiral.
Right. So with this, another aspect what's coming up is that credit growth is something which is not picking up. Deposit growth for the banks is going up. Now, do you think if this continues, what's the kind of position the banks will be in?
Yeah, see, I mean, the banking system has to, I mean, when they collect deposits,
Mm,
they can't just keep their deposits in SLR or in government securities. Then with that kind of spread, I mean, sometimes, they may have negative spread.
mm,
In which case, because the cost of deposits may sometimes, be more than the return, let's say, or the yield they may get. Let's say the yield numbers have actually gone down, quite honestly. In that backdrop, for the banking system to mobilize more deposits without expanding credit is also a bit of a question mark. I mean, it does not improve the stability of the financial system at all, quite clearly.
mm,
The RBI's attempt to push credit, to push the banking system to expand credit Some of the other is also not working. I mean, our Indian banking is a little slow to respond. I mean, I must admit, far more slower than you may find it elsewhere. So, in which case, let's say some of these things are not taking roots. I mean, gathering
Mm,
deposits has its own challenges because unless you earn on assets, and you build assets, you're not getting anywhere.
mm.
There's something else. The savings, household savings will grow, and that is a very natural phenomenon because the consumption has got curtailed. You see, with reduction in some bit of consumption, that savings is getting mobilized. Now, what is good for economy is still a fine balance between savings and consumption, basically, you see. So to that extent, the banking system in the backdrop of all this is still struggling. I mean, I must admit.
Mm,
You get a clear sense, and I'm making a bold statement here, but when it comes to sort of thinking and acting to, the environment from the commercial and from the economic good kind of, let's say, environment. I mean, our banking system and our public sector banking system is not really known for it, quite honestly.
mm,
They take their own sweet time in making decisions, you know. So these three reforms, for example, if I did a survey, and when I find what has the banking system done to even create awareness amongst the borrowers
mm.
of the three reforms, for example, and I'm not finding very encouraging answers here.
Right. So, so Mr. Parekh, with this, what is your view? How do you see the asset quality of banks panning out from here on, taking the impact of restructuring of loans and moratoriums into consideration?
See, I mean, the quality of the banking system is bound to suffer, you know, because there are far too many unanswered questions, which are quite beyond, in fact, ACLGS 1, 2, and COVID-19 resolution,
Mm,
stress resolution. I mean, for example, infrastructure is beyond it, NBFC is still beyond it, real estate is still beyond it. So, in that backdrop, one would say that the NPA numbers shall certainly rise. I mean, there is very little doubt about it.
mm,
It may even rise to the extent RBI is worrying about it. So, in the last monetary policy, and also in the financial stability report, we saw that the regulator was actually showing his concern, on this particular aspect. And to that extent, I would say things may pan out to be quite bad. However, I'm just qualifying my statement. The good part about the last 2 months has been that the economic performance has showed a certain order of getting back. So
mm.
this so-called V-shaped economic recovery and all that we were talking about, some sectors it is happening, quite
Right.
honestly. And these are critical sectors. Auto, for example, is one of them. These are critical sectors. They employ a large number of people. So income at the grassroots level will sort of, change hands. Income at rural level is already started changing hands. The consumption at rural level is growing. So the good part about it is that if the economic performance improves, and the downturn may not be as sharp as like minus 19% to we came down to minus 10%. We're now looking at minus 7%,
Mm,
of GDP kind of reduction. In that backdrop, I would say the banking system may be able to recover. So the NPAs may not suddenly look so bad, as much as it was envisaged. I mean, we all, of course, are looking at uncertainty. If there is a resurgence of COVID, for example, then once again the economy, or there are partial lockdowns and the economy may suffer. So these are some of the imponderables. But leaving aside those, I mean, I'm feeling a little sort of comfort in the area that the economic performance is improving, which means a recovery in banking may happen. Uh, it is in the good of the banking system to really embrace, ECLGS 1, 2, and COVID-19 RBI with both their hands. I mean, quite honestly. So that's their hope of really converting the possible NPAs into possibly, I mean, because these are government-backed kind of schemes. So possible NPAs that may happen, let's say a year from now or 6 months, which happened in the case of earlier stimulus program in 2012, that can be avoided if the banking system is a little more agile and a little more responsive.
mm.
to answer your question, Hiran.
Right. So with this, we saw what happened with the Lakshmi Vilas Bank, and then after that, you had RBI who actually ordered a special audit of Shrey Infrastructure and its subsidiary. Do you think what RBI is doing with regards to monitoring the top 50 NBFCs, which it considers systematically important to the ecosystem, do you think they're doing it in the right fashion or something more needs to be done on that front?
Yeah, see, I mean, let's look at it this way. We have about 12,400 or 12,500 registered NBFCs with the RBI. Now, I mean, the approach that the RBI is taking on looking at 50 NBFCs is more from this financial stability point of view. I mean, they're systemically important to the extent that they have 75% of the assets, of the total NBFC balance sheet, basically. So if you protect them, if you, look after them, and if you continuously monitor them more than anything else, then to that extent, let's say the financial stability to certain extent is let's say protected. Now that is a fair approach. I mean, for the last 8 or 9 monetary policies, the RBI has been talking about this. The point now is, and Lakshmi Vilas Bank is a very, very interesting turning point in this regard. I mean, I would say it's one of the kind, and it's therefore a good beginning. I think somewhere along there is an acceptance that the capital for the banking system is not going to come from the government.
Mm,
The government should have actually pumped in by now at least about 8 to 9 lakh crores of capital into the public sector banking,
mm,
which it has not. I mean, what is happening is just a trickle. I mean,
mm,
so I mean, 14,000 and 15,000 crores a year, or I mean, initially 75,000 it started, and then another 75,000, and then thereafter it has been trickling. That kind of capital is not adequate for banking system at all.
mm,
So the capital has to come from somewhere. So now you can almost see, Hiral, that there are thought processes around, let's say, foreign banks acquiring Indian
mm,
banks, for example, let's say. So, which means foreign capital, I mean, and that too from, let's say, well-guarded jurisdictions.
mm,
Jurisdictions, where there is a lot of financial sort of oversight, a lot of regulatory oversight.
mm.
And I mean, if the capital comes from them, then it gives certain kind of stability to the Indian banking system. And I would say very commendable thought process. I mean, it's a landmark example. And the reason why I call it a landmark example here
Mm,
is because so far, between the government and the regulator, the acceptance that foreign capital should also come into Indian banking has just not been there. For last 15 years, 20 years, they've been talking about it, but with no conclusive decision. DBS is a one single sort of example where it signifies a new change in the entire
mm,
direction, basically. So one. Second is even the thought process. I mean, in IWG, the internal working group of the RBI has really come up with its recommendations. And let's not forget, I mean, let's look at the people in the IWG. I mean, they comprise of the board members of the RBI, central board, let's say, of directors. I mean, the member who's leading the IWGs is a member there. So there must be some seriousness in those recommendations, and capital coming from corporates, for example, is a remarkable change, in the thinking of the regulator. 1991, they opened up the licensing. 2000, they did a couple of banks. 2012, 13, they did a couple of banks. I mean, the approvals were given. But they talked about corporates getting into banking, they didn't do it. IWG is a remarkable recommendation. So, I mean, to answer the question, I suppose capital must be found, you know, and I think in Lakshmi Vilas Bank,
mm,
there is a signal of that.
mm,
50%, I mean, 50 NBFCs, top 50 NBFCs to be protected is certainly a very clear, because
mm,
I mean, 12,600, NBFCs, and some of these NBFCs on a back to back have their assets in what RBI classifies as speculative assets. I mean, capital markets, or for that matter, real estate, basically, And the banking regulator does not like those assets. I mean, it has made it, last 3 decades, we've seen that. Time and again, whenever there has been an opportunity, the regulator has been saying that. So to that extent, I mean, I would say the approaches are valid. You know, the question that comes up in my mind is, with that kind of, let's say, support and that kind of 250 NBFCs, I mean, will the NBFCs more than 50,000 crores ever then think about becoming a bank?
Mm.
It's still a bit of a question mark. I mean, it's an unanswered question. RBI will have to do so much more than what it has done so far in really making NBFCs come forward, for that stuff.
Right. So tell me one thing. You mentioned about the IWG's recommendation of allowing industrial houses to float banks. Do you think the timing is right with regards to giving out licenses?
See, I mean, let's look at, first of all, the so-called demand side of it. I mean, the supply side we'll talk about a little later. See, from the demand side, we, in fact, when it comes to corporates, the normal behavior, I don't know, I mean, that behavior perhaps may be an offshoot of the so-called sort of, the Raj and the licensing kind of era. Each time, and let's say a new, and I mean, a sector is to be opened up for private sector, there's a club or a herd mentality, you know, everybody wants to jump in. And everybody starts believing that he has got the best corporate governance, that can be displayed, that can be demonstrated. Then he will start believing that whatever, let's say, issues he may have in regard his own experience with banking in terms of his own repayment record or his own compliance record with other regulators wherever there are other regulators, they all start believing that we are like saints, and the minute you say, oh, someone else is going to get the license, I mean, the first question that arises is, why am I not getting that approval, in principle approval? I mean, I'm so pure and I'm so clean, sort of, and which means immediately then you say, oh, then there is a political patronage and, these people get licenses, I'm not getting licenses. Now, that is the backdrop of demand part of our. What is the supply side of it? I think the supply side is very clear, one line, which is those corporates. I mean, 1,000 crore that they are talked about, Hiral, to my mind, is absolutely peanuts. Absolutely. A corporate house, unless it is in a position to demonstrate that it can set aside at least 40, 50,000 crore of capital, when it comes to credit expansion in a gradual manner, unless, I mean, he has a liquidity and a surplus of that kind of, that's a capital available, I think they should not, because then you're creating more financial instability in the system. I mean, we know that corporate houses themselves go through economic cycles, basically. Several of their businesses go through those cyclical issues, basically. Now, imagine some corporate house owning a bank, for example, or at least being a promoter. Owning is the wrong word, but being a promoter, let's say, of a bank. And then his own group suffers on account of various reasons. I mean, maybe it's his own doing, or maybe the economy is not performing. But what does a deposit holder do in that backdrop? I mean, even a PMC, can create, some kind of the cooperative bank that we talked about, create a panic in the system, for example, or something like LVB happens and the regulator starts sort of, getting concerned about it. Because the mindset is the deposit holders don't look at the bank, they don't look at the board, they start straight away looking at the government or the regulator. The first question that arises in the media from the deposit holders is, what is the regulator doing about it? What has it been doing for the last 3 years? And things like those, basically. So those questions came up in Lakshmi Vilas Bank as well. Till of course DBS came as a solution, basically. So in that backdrop, to create corporate banking, corporate houses with banking system, with banking companies, and
mm,
then those, let's say, corporates suffering on account of economic problems. So ring fencing, protecting deposit holders, and the due diligence itself, Hiral. I mean, corporate houses, I mean, quite honestly, if you look at the structures, the corporate structures that they create, you know, valid reasons. I mean, sometimes out of tax consideration, sometimes out of, getting the capital from out of overseas locations. So they create structures in Mauritius or in tax-free zones. These are various structures that the corporates create basically for their own business. For the
right.
regulator to conduct a due diligence on all that, and non-listed entities, for example, or
Mm,
special purpose vehicles created by corporates. So we saw in, ILS, Ireland FS, we saw, some 348 structures. I mean, little did we know about those structures till the whole problem came to the forefront. In fact, before the eyes of people, we didn't know that we thought ILFS was one structure. We didn't know that there were so many corporate structures and SPV structures underneath it, you know. And what does the regulator do? He's rendered helpless, in fact, in those situations, basically. So, my point is, therefore, that the due diligence and the fit and proper that the regulator does,
mm,
on corporate houses, it's really a different effort, a different level of, the regulator will have to first prepare himself for something like
mm,
that. And the various statutes also, various statutes, including Companies Act, so many acts, so many statutes may not give the RBI the kind of power, let's say, to demand any kind of, let's say, information from out of these corporate houses. Uh, I don't know, it's a very tricky situation. The recommendations are nice and purely driven out of capital requirement. But the amount of administrative and regulatory work that will have to be carried out, that will have to be really envisaged well, I thought, right in the beginning.
mm. Right. So with this, what would your thoughts be on privatization and consolidation of the PSU banks?
See, consolidation is happening now. And further consolidation, I suppose, still some good experience of this consolidation happens, let's say, is a bit of a question mark. Let me articulate my point. So one single example of the consolidation which started earlier itself, that seems to be on track. That's the information or that's the impression you're gathering, the Bank of Baroda one. So that seems to be sort of getting under control and it seems to be performing. The rest of the consolidation, to the outside world, there is no white paper available in saying, look, exactly the process is here. And they'll complete their integration, of technology, people, branch network, everything within a certain time frame, A, and B. And what is the grand plan? After they do that consolidation, where at what level of performance they will be is not known to, even the shareholder himself, the government himself, basically. Now, in that backdrop, further consolidation is a bit of a question mark. The only area of consolidation may be those old private sector banking companies like LVB. Periodically, if they go down and under, then some amount of, let's say, regulatory process may have to really kick in. But the second question of privatization is an interesting one. So let's look at the privatization of LIC. I'm just taking as an example, over here. Let's take the example of LIC, for example. Now, we started with it. Several legal issues remain unanswered, quite honestly. Personally, I believe that the money that LIC will raise does not belong to the government at all. Actually, it belongs to the policyholders because they are the ones who have actually provided the solvency to LIC.
Right.
The solvency has been created from out of the policyholders' funds. They are the rightful owners, of that capital or whatever, let's say, so-called sort of intrinsic value of LIC, basically.
Mm, mm,
To that extent, in case of privatization, without corporatization, banking companies will face a huge challenge. The whole aspect of governance is, of course, always been on the sides. I mean, it has been thrown outside of the windows. BBB never became really functional, the banking board bureau or whatever. So, in that backdrop, privatization is a question mark. I mean, a question I have, let's say, on behalf of the investors. I
Mm.
mean, I work very closely with several investors who are interested in Indian banking and investing in Indian banking. Do we have reliable data? Do we have a certain order of governance in these banking companies? So I thought before privatization, Hiral, we should start talking about corporatization. We
Right.
should talk about governance, a very good governance to give investors comfort. You know, I mean, DBS is a different example because DBS is acquiring the entire capital.
Mm.
But if privatization happens, for example, an investor puts in 20% of his equity into, or the total equity of the banking company, the existing banking company into, let's say, into the capital, for instance. What is he going to get out of it? I mean, if the board members are still selected by the government, or if, let's say, the performance continues to be let's say, efficiency levels, or productivity continues to be that, what is he really getting in the bargain? So I suppose the assets will have to be made worthy of selling to begin with, unless they are actually sellable in its honest sense. Talk about, I mean, even LIC, for example, what is the investor going to? I mean, they are now going to give it to the retail investor. What is he going to get out of it? I mean, basically, if you look at the dividends and if you look at the value of the capital, here there's absolutely nothing to talk about.
Mm.
So these are some thoughts and questions, I mean, I would say.
Right. So overall, if you have to look at the next 12 to 18 months, how are you seeing the retail banking space shape up from here on? Do you think we could see major changes, going into FY21, over the next 12 to 18 months, and will that be a positive change?
So, that's something that, let's say, really is the crux of, let's say, the entire financial soundness of the banking system. How does the economy perform, let's say, in the next 1 year or 1.5 years, 4 or 6 quarters? If the recovery continues the way it is, then it's not the overall economic story, then it becomes a sector story. What sectors are really recovering, and therefore healthy banking and supporting those sectors, will be sort of the task of the bankers, quite clearly. I can see some amount of sort of, silver lining there. I can see a certain order of, I mean, some sectors which were actually not performing economically. They were not economically sort of, doing so well in 2018 and 19, like auto sector or telecom for the telephony has increased on account of the new sort of, world which has got created. So in that backdrop, I mean, some sectors will do well and they may start doing even better. So banking system can really support that. Some sectors will continue to have difficulty. So tourism may continue to have challenges. Aviation may continue to have challenges for a while, for instance, let's say. So then it becomes a sector study. I mean, if the overall economic recovery is there, and let's say some sectors may perform well, banking system will really go out and support that system. So to that extent, the banking balance sheets will also strengthen, I mean, I would say. The exposure that they may already have to the other sectors, they will have to manage. I'm sure they will have to manage sort of, and monitor them very closely. I'm seeing, therefore, I'm an optimist. I'm seeing that the banking system with more capital coming in, and I mean, even if we don't decide for corporate houses for the time being, but even if we do carry out two reforms, one is inviting foreign capital into Indian banking, and second is, I mean, converting NBFCs, it is the large ones, the top 10 or 12 ones. And ideally, deposit taking is the first candidate, if you ask me here. Deposit taking NBFCs could be the first candidates. That would strengthen the financial system a lot, to my mind.
Right. So overall, then, what would your outlook be for the financial system, for the banks as a whole? And do you think the RBI needs to step up their game from here on, taking the entire scenario into consideration? Because what's happening is, even with the NPA resolution, a bad bank has been a proposal since quite some time. Nothing has been done on that front as well. So
Yeah.
overall, if you have to take a holistic view, how do you see it shaping up?
So, I mean, first and foremost is the so-called worry that we had of, let's say, COVID and the banking system suffering on account of COVID.
Mm,
That seems to be really passing out. I mean, it seems to be gradually, we seem to be coming out of that. You know, the impact has not been as bad. So look at the numbers. I mean, earlier also I mentioned ECLGS 1, 2, COVID-19 RBI resolution program. You know, there the numbers are not so large, which means the economy seems to be fixing itself. I mean, that's the first impression you get in basically. Uh, in that backdrop, efficient players, even within public sector banking, I would say, three or four efficient players will benefit a lot. I can see them because they have AECLGS guarantee behind them. They have this recognition of the regulator. They can make fast decisions. They'll certainly perform well. I mean, I would certainly say. So from the outcome point of view, I would say in a year and a half's time, these banking institutions may become even more healthier. I mean, that's my reading of the situation
mm, mm.
compared to the fears that we had, let's say. Private sector, top six or seven, they put their act together. You know, one or two of them sort of, had a bit of a challenges. One or two will continue to have some difficulty. That's it. I mean, the infrastructure types or the ones who have really acquired assets that they could not really monitor too well, they may suffer out of the top, let's say, 10 private sector banking companies I'm talking about. But the others will do extremely well, to my mind,
Mm,
because they will start using the guarantee scheme to their advantage. And why not? So that, that's what the government wants, and that's what the banking system also wants, to extend credit to MSME, eligible MSMEs, which is backed up by the government, let's say
mm,
the guarantee is there, sort of. So to that extent, I'm seeing them taking a huge advantage of that. The laggards are some of the public sector entities, the
mm,
banking companies. They're going to suffer quite clearly. They're going to suffer, without naming, but it's not too difficult to really sort of, analyze and find out who they are.
mm,
But they are a group by themselves, and something will have to be done by the regulator, and particularly by the government more than the regulator
mm,
about those, let's say, four or five so-called laggards, or those who are languishing, behind the others, because they seem to eventually in a year and a half's time create more, let's say, challenges to the regulator, to my mind. So that's something that quickly on the RBI, the regulators, commendable so far. Now is the challenge. They put a lot of liquidity into the system. With rate reduction, they've really managed the interest rates quite well. Up to now, I'm saying.
mm, mm.
Two dimensions will really, the regulator will have to, the monetary policy will have to really look at more carefully. One is the inflation.
Mm.
If the demand certainly comes out, and the supply management is not in keeping with that demand, we are going to see inflation even rising. The retail investor, the inflation rising quite clearly. So CPI numbers may see sort of some adverse movement. Uh, Currency is the other challenge that the regulator is going to have.
Correct.
Managing rupee and yet performing on exports, is going to be a larger task for the regulator. So I would say in this backdrop, a lot of challenges, but the hope is there. I would say.
Absolutely. The hope is there, and hopefully we match up to the expectations as well. Thank you, Mr. Parikh, so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so
Great
much.
insights that we picked up. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as well. Hoping to see you back soon again, and stay safe, and Merry Christmas in advance as well.
Thank you so very much, Hiral, and you also, to you as well, and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.